We've left the 80s behind now, so pack away your high-volume hairspray and your Frankie Says Relax t-shirt and remove that poster of Tiffany looking all saucy from your bedroom wall, as it's time to get extreme and radical and be full of attitude, cowabunga, dudes. 1990 was a year remembered for Maggie Thatcher leaving office, the poll tax riots, and England's run to the World Cup semi-final, and of course, Gazza's tears. Cheer up, old boy, you'll be planning for a fishing trip with Raoul Moat in no time. Well, sometime. About 15 to 20 years, maybe. In video games, we were firmly in the 16-bit era at this point. November would see the Megadrive hit European shelves in time for Christmas, no less, you lucky children. The Japanese launch of the Super Famicom would happen the next month. Of course, that's the Super Nintendo over here for people who are watching this video and have sort of stumbled upon it and don't know anything about games, I guess. Also released was the Neo Geo AES, SNK's Rolls-Royce machine that did what Sega promised with the Mega Drive. It brought that arcade home. But boy, oh boy, what a price those cartridges were. $100 to $300 per game? Get out of here. Also, the Game Gear and the portable Turbo Graphics were released in glorious Technicolor for you handheld fans. But sadly, we had to say goodbye to our dear old friend the Spectrum as Amstrad finally ceased production, ending its 8-year-long dominance of the UK home computer markets. I would imagine Amstrad probably wanted to make some factory space for its GX4000 console, and it probably then had a very empty factory from 1991 onwards, because that didn't do very well, did it? Oops. The rules are relatively simple. 1, it's my opinions. Your opinions might be different. There might be games that you prefer that came out in 1990. Maybe you'll see them in the honourable mentions and go, why isn't that number 2 or 3? You know what? People are different. I'm an idiot. I have terrible taste in things. As long as we accept that, I think we'll get along just fine. Now, the other rule is that the game has to have come out in 1990. Now, I could have played it in 1997, in 2007, or in 2017. Doesn't matter. As long as it came out in its original format in 1990, then that is counted as the year of release. Now, the only difference being is if it's a complete remake or a reboot or a completely different conversion. There's been a few of those, like Bionic Commando on the NES, which was a very different game from the arcade. But apart from that, it has to have come out in 1990. Okay, capiche? These rules are simple, aren't they? Lovely. Much easier than Risk. First up, we've got a bit of a cheat, and we've gone for 2 titles in the same position, but I think it warrants a look at, seeing as these 2 were the first truly decent Ghostbusters titles. Activision's Ghostbusters 1 and 2 were inventive enough, but they were also very frustrating, fractured, and frankly not a lot of cop to play. They lacked a certain bit of the fun and silliness of the source material, in my opinion, with the famous NES ending screen being the sole laugh from either game, and that wasn't really intentional, was it? You just rushed it a bit, didn't you? Oops. Data East also put out an arcade game based on the real Ghostbusters cartoon in 1987, but that was really just a weak Gauntlet clone. It was put out on home computers a little while after that. So it wasn't until 1990 that we finally got a lovely pair of slime-covered beauties. I think. Sega's Ghostbusters and HAL Laboratories' new Ghostbusters 2 were those two beauties. Both went for the super deformed giant head versions of the movie characters, and already we've gone a long way to capturing some of the playful nature of the movies. Sega's effort is a platform shoot 'em up with an original story, not based on either Ghostbusters movies, but we do see a few familiar spooks turn up. You can select from Ray, Peter and Egon, but not Winston. I'm sure there's no funny reason why Winston's not in the game, but if anyone wants to get a time machine and go back to Sega Japan in 1990 and just see if there were any burning crosses outside or any white cows or anything, just let us know so we can condemn them. Maybe. It's a little generic, but it's got a charm to it that's very Ghostbusters, and it's fun enough. You know, it's a fun little platform game, not up there with Revenge of Shinobi or anything like that, but it is a fun platform game to play, and it's got that Ghostbusters feel that I think the older games lacked. New Ghostbusters 2, however, for the NES was even better. Unlike the lame conversion of Activision's home computer telling of the Supernatural sequel, this is an eminently addictive top-down exploration shoot-'em-up dripping with busting goodness. Not only that, but HAL's title allows you to be 5 Ghostbusters, including Winston and Rick Moranis' Louis Tully. Though Activision put their foot down and said, America, you're not playing it. You're only having this dogshit sandwich. Don't eye up that salmon. Or if you don't like salmon, whatever your favourite food is. It uses the proton pack and trap mechanic in a sensible way, as opposed to David Crane's game that's fun, as you have 2 characters going around and they're operated by you and it's not a total chore. Finally, Ray Parker Jr. is not the only one who will have busting making him feel good. With these 2 titles, busting will almost certainly make you feel good. Give them a go. Here's a controversial one. Assault Suit Leonis, I think that's how you say it, aka Target Earth, let's call it that, has never been thought of as a good game by most. However, there is something about Target Earth that really appealed to me personally. Our exposure to anime in the 1980s was restricted to stuff like Battle of the Planets or the 1986 Transformers the movie. Shortly afterwards, Akira would get mainstream appeal in the West, and then we'd start getting weebs on our side of the planet. But this grand space battle with radioed in story development was pretty uniquely Japanese and quite an exotic entry point for me into anime at this time. This was like Gundam, but for your Megadrive, with your own troops and robots flying in around you to help. They didn't really help though, but they set the scene a lot better than most other games. And it was an incredible experience for me at the time. As I said, it isn't very well regarded in much of the retro community, so maybe this is what you call a guilty pleasure. There's a remake on the PlayStation 4 store that's a hoot too. I say give it a go. I've always loved the game. I can understand why others don't like it. The controls are a bit janky, but I say you should give it a go. And why don't you? So this one is Grenada, or Grenada, or Grenada. Let's go with Grenada, as in the country. The Megadrive had a lot of shooters, most of them brilliant, be they horizontal or vertically scrolling. So being brilliant sometimes wasn't enough to stand out in the Megadrive shooter crowd. However, Grenada certainly did for me. Grenada was a free-roaming, top-down tank shooter, which already narrows it down in terms of its genre field somewhat. It never looked too hot, but it had some fantastic strafe controls that just made it play like a dream. It also benefits greatly from that future history stuff that's always quite funny, as it's set in Africa in the future year of 2016. Ho ho, you thought we'd have giant planes that you could steer a future tank over. You silly thing, 1990. What a wally. I've always felt a little disturbed by Mickey Mouse's character design. I think it might be his face. It's like his face fur has receded back from his nose, but he has this widow's peak thing going on here. Not only that, but much like many other men suffering from male pattern baldness, all that hair has migrated into his ears. I also don't like the way he struts around shirtless, but with gloves on. Make up your mind if you're cold or not, mate. Come on. Regardless of this, Mickey Mouse in the Castle of Illusion is another excellent addition to the growing ranks of the great Disney platform titles of the era. It's a kid-friendly platformer with an easy mode that even an ankle biter could handle okay. And Castle of Illusion is very much a gorgeous platformer dripping in Disney magic. Undoubtedly the best Megadrive game of its type in the pre-Sonic era. Mickey Mouse bum bounces and hurls objects around in his quest to thwart this evil witch. Boo hiss. It was definitely one of those titles that made you want to upgrade from your 8-bit system. A feast for the eyes and the fingers, despite featuring this creepy, balding, middle-aged rodent with a child's voice. Ugh. One key attribute most home racing games didn't have in the 8-bit era was probably the key component: speed. Futuristic Super Nintendo launch title FZero had that in spades. A fantastic introduction to the powers of Mode 7. FZero was a tough challenge, but a good one. Some fantastic visuals and a thumping, memorable music score definitely helped, influencing both Mario Kart and most certainly Wipeout. Come on! FZero is truly a fantastic racer. Dr. Mario is a game that makes you wonder about Mario's doctorate. Aren't you a plumber? Or sometimes a tennis umpire? And sometimes a boxing ref? Just what do you do as a day job? Do you think that you've got enough time to study for a doctorate as well? And do you think it's a good idea to treat an illness by just relentlessly throwing endless pills down someone's throat until the problem goes away? That seems extreme, but regardless of any impending lawsuits for poor old Dr. Mario, this game plays extremely well indeed. Dr. Mario has that essential just one more go feel that games like Tetris, Pipe Mania, Columns and Tetris Attack have, and the fact that the graphics look at best dreadful. Cannot deny it is number 5 on this list because it's such a good game. I just hope that the courts are nice on you, Dr. Mario, you bloody quack. Rampart is another game that I feel doesn't get enough love. As a one-player game, it's tepid at best. Those ships can be very elusive. Walls, though, they're easy to hit. And so two-player Rampart is where it's at. Round 1 involves you blasting away at your opponent's walls, attempting to make it as extremely difficult for them to reconstruct it afterwards as humanly possible. Round 2 is where that happens, because what you have to do is you take tetraminos like in Tetris, and they must be used to plug any holes in your defences against a very short time limit. If you're feeling confident, you can surround other towers and increase your firepower. Fail to seal off a castle though, and that's it, you're done, you lose. You can take out people's cannons, you can take out their walls, it's up to you, but you just got to make sure you do as much damage to them as possible. There's so much strategy involved with this gameplay, but so much forward planning when you're rebuilding. It is a very good game that baffles me why it's not mentioned in the same breath as some of those other two-player classics of the time. It's also another good example of just how good Atari were at the time, which is something I think we forget about these days. Never mind. The script creation utility for Maniac Mansion was first used in Maniac Mansion, but it wasn't until The Secret of Monkey Island that we got the best use of the SCUM engine. What a lovely word that is. The puzzles were less obtuse than its predecessor, giving Secret of Monkey Island a distinct advantage. Guybrush Threepwood can solve many of the puzzles by combining items in his inventory or with the many objects or people in the game world. Other puzzles are solved with dialogue, especially the legendary insult sword fighting, where brawling pirates have to outquip each other to gain an advantage. Ultimately, what makes Secret of Monkey Island a standout and a classic that's still played to this day is how wryly funny it is. It really is one of the most humorous games in history, and while that's not the usual scale you measure about a game's quality, it certainly makes gameplay even more appealing than it is. A bona fide classic. Pinball games aren't supposed to be at number 2 in Games of the Year lists, but Devil Crush deserves it. This despite it being largely based on a single table. But what a table! It's like the wet dream of a 12-year-old who's only listened to one death metal album once and started drawing pictures that's going to worry his parents, all in his textbooks and things. Skeleton warriors, fleshy skulls, whatever this is, it's a bit penisy, a dragon lady who becomes steadily more evil, high Game of Thrones, like that. It's a blast to play to, with a selection of difficult to get to and even more difficult to stay in bonus stages as you attempt to get that elusive perfect score. It looks great, the soundtrack is one of the best video game soundtracks of all time, and you don't even have to love pinball to have an utter blast with it. It is superb. Super Mario World is without a doubt the absolute perfect refinement of the Super Mario Bros. Formula, which absolutely ensures its place as the greatest 2D platformer of the era and probably of all time. You've got a vast amount of levels and secrets, the crispest controls in the series to date, the introduction of Yoshi, the perfect difficulty level. The only thing I'd say that lets it down are the slightly uninspiring graphics. It was the last 2D Mario platformer for a few generations too, if we don't count Yoshi's solo efforts. But what a way to go out, and what a way to launch a console. Bravo Shigsy, bravo. And that's Mario crowned for 1990. To think we hadn't heard Cotton Eye Joe at this point. Wonderful times. Okay, thanks, bye.